Okay guys, before we get into this video, I want to take a couple minutes to talk about the state of building PCs these days and how people are reacting to it. And if you don't care about that and you just want to see how an i5-12600K with an RTX 3050 performs, then jump ahead. I don't blame you. Time codes are at the bottom. The first thing that I want to make clear is that I understand the product shortage sucks. You know it, I know it, your grandma maybe knows it, it's no secret. Plenty of people are building PCs with not only parts that they can afford, but parts that they can even find. Now, I'm not a big YouTuber. I don't get products just dropped off at my doorstep. So I've been lucky enough to win a lot of my parts in the Newegg Shuffle and be able to buy them at retail. So I understand your frustration when you have these big YouTubers with piles of hardware telling you what you should and shouldn't buy with your own money, as if you even have a choice right now. The second thing is that I understand the term budget is relative. Many of you out there have different financial responsibilities and financial situations. So a $1,000 PC to somebody could be budget, and to another person, that could be way too expensive. I made this video because I feel like for the first time since the mining boom and all the product shortages that you can actually build what can be considered a budget machine with brand new retail parts. And while I'm 100% on board with taking an old Dell Optiplex and throwing an old GPU in it, if I have to see another one of those videos on YouTube, I might actually throw up. And the last thing is to please be understanding when it comes to people's choices of the hardware that they purchase. I know the Radeon 6500 XT was underwhelming to say the least, but I've seen so many threads and comment sections of people just shitting on each other for buying it, and you don't know their situation. That could be all that they could afford. That could be all that was in stock. Maybe they just play esports titles at 1080p and it's perfectly fine for them. Let people enjoy things, my God. Not everybody wants an old, overpriced RX 580 that's been through more miners than Jared from Subway. If somebody is buying something with their own money and it makes them happy and that upsets you, then you really need to take a step back and reevaluate some things in your life. But that's it. That's my rant. Let's talk about this thing right here. So this is it. This is my 2022 budget PC build. And like I said, this is probably the first time in a long time that you can actually build what can be considered a budget machine with brand new retail parts. So what's in this thing? Well, let's move it over here. You don't really need to see it. Let's see. Yeah, it looks good. So what's in this thing? Well, obviously for the CPU, we went with an Intel i5-12600K, which is a 10-core, 16-thread processor where 6 of the cores are hyper-threaded performance cores, and 4 of them are efficiency cores. So yeah, do the math. It's 10 cores, 16 threads, real weird. Now, I did do a video on this before. If you want to check out my thoughts on specifically that processor, I will link that video up here. But the main part of this is the RTX 3050, which is NVIDIA's new budget GPU. And surprisingly, it's all sold out at retailers. Like I said, I was lucky enough to get it in a Newegg Shuffle for $320. Now they do have $250 models and I've seen them go up to $500 MSRP. So definitely don't buy the $500 one. TLDR, at the price I paid for it, I can maybe recommend it for $250, definitely. So assuming you pick up a 12600K for $280 and an RTX 3050 for $280, you're already sitting at $530, which a couple of years ago could get you a full PC. But this is 2022, this is what we're working with, and this is what you can get. So I'm briefly going to touch on the rest of the parts because while they matter a little bit, you have much more flexibility when it comes to things like a motherboard, RAM, what storage you decide to go with, and your case. And those don't play too much of a role in your overall performance. Yes, I know that faster RAM can get you some more FPS in games, and certain motherboards perform better than others, and cases allow different ventilation and better airflow for cooling. But again, I'm not a big YouTuber. I can't test every single motherboard with RAM and case combination. So this is what I have. For the motherboard, I have an Aorus Z690i. For the RAM, I have two 8GB sticks of DDR4 clocked at 3600 megahertz. For storage, I have a 500GB NVMe Samsung Evo. The case is a Cooler Master NR200, I believe, and to cool the CPU, we are going with a 280mm AIO from Be Quiet. So yeah, like I said, feel free to mix and match parts to get your desired outcome for the budget you want to spend, but at the heart of it, we'll be using the 12600K and the RTX 3050. So let's talk about the RTX 3050 for a minute. Now, NVIDIA conveniently released this just a couple of days after AMD's lackluster release of their RX 6500 XT, which only shipped with 4GB of RAM, only 4 lanes of PCI Gen 4 connectivity, and no encoding. Whereas with NVIDIA's 3050, you're getting 8GB of RAM, a full 16 lanes of PCI Gen 4, and of course, you get encoding on it. So at the same price, by far the NVIDIA outperforms AMD in this situation. So along with everything I just mentioned, you get 2,560 CUDA cores, DLSS and ray tracing. For video out, you get one HDMI 2.1 port and 3 DisplayLink 1.4 ports. And unlike previous generation 50 series cards, this is powered by an 8-pin PCI connector. So gone are the days of your budget GPU just using PCI slot power. You need supplemental power from your power supply to power this guy. Just said power a lot. All right, before we get into the performance numbers, let me just make it clear that the only modifications I've done is that I've enabled XMP and basic overclocking for the processor, and I have left the GPU at stock. So obviously the first thing we have to run is Cinebench to see how the CPU performs. And in Cinebench R23, we got a overall multi-core score of 16,146. And I said this in my previous video about the 12600K. That is an impressive score. For a mid-range i5 processor for under $300, that is amazing performance. And it was doing this without even breaking 60 degrees at 94 watts on the package. So very impressive. 100% recommend this processor. Jumping over into 3D Mark Time Spy, after running that, we got a score of 6,883 overall, with a graphics score of 6,348 and a compute score of 13,191. And remember, this is a 50 series card. If we compare this to, I guess, the last desktop 50 series card we got, which was the 1050 Ti, this blows it out of the water, and it should. Obviously, that card is, what, 3 years old by now? And that just shows you how far we've come at 1080p gaming on a 50 series card, which is considered, bottom of the barrel. While these scores don't look super impressive, since you're used to seeing scores from, 3080s and 3090s, for a 50 series card, this is actually pretty impressive. So when we jumped into gaming, obviously this is designed for 1080p. So I did run quite a few games from esports titles to AAA titles at 1080p, but I also wanted to see how this thing can handle 4K gaming. So we did that as well. So the first thing I did was run a couple of esports titles, CSGO and League of Legends, both at 1080p and 4K. And obviously at 1080p, they performed really well, with CSGO getting us around 280 FPS and League of Legends pretty much capping out at 240. Bumping up the resolution to 4K, CSGO at high settings got around 109 FPS, while League of Legends, again, maxed out at 4K, was getting 180. So yeah, this is more than adequate for esports titles, but how does it handle actual games? I loaded up The Witcher 3, and at 1080p high settings, we were getting 74 FPS, well above what is considered the playable 60 FPS. So again, AAA titles, The Witcher is old, but it's still a pretty demanding game to run. But what about at 4K? Well, we bumped up the resolution to 4K, we lowered the quality to medium, and we're still getting 36 FPS. So if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of the FPS to get a higher resolution and be more immersed in the environment, then 36 is still pretty playable. Next, we ran Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which again is an older game, but still demanding. And at 1080p, high settings, in the in-game benchmark, we averaged 75 FPS. Bumping up the resolution to 4K brought the FPS all the way down to 29. And It's kind of encroaching on the 30 FPS territory where, yes, it's playable, but you might want to sacrifice some details or some resolution to get a smoother gameplay. But we have a trick up our sleeve with this GPU. Remember how I said it supports DLSS? Well, with DLSS enabled at 4K resolution, that brought the FPS all the way up to 40. Now, 40 doesn't sound all that impressive, but when you're going from 29 to 40, that's essentially a 33% increase. And if you don't know what DLSS is, it's NVIDIA's deep learning supersampling, which essentially is rendering your frames at a lower resolution and then upscaling them to 4K or whatever resolution you have set. So this gives you the benefits of a higher FPS by rendering at a low resolution and the better visual fidelity that comes with a higher resolution. It's a very impressive technology. It's come a long way since DLSS version 1.0, and I honestly think just that feature alone makes this graphics card a strong contender even at its current price. Now let's dive into a newer game, Cyberpunk 2077. Famous game that's impossible to run, even though they've done some optimization since launch, thank God, but still a very difficult game to run. At 1080p medium settings, we were getting 65 FPS, which, again, very impressive for a 50 series card. And bumping it up to 4K, yeah, at medium, we were getting 22 FPS, which that's where I might draw the line and say you're gonna have to change some things. But again, DLSS has come to the rescue. Turning on DLSS to the balanced settings bumped us all the way up to 38. 38 FPS, 4K, Cyberpunk 2077 on a 50 series card. Yes, I know the shortage sucks. Yes, I know this is more expensive than previous 50 series cards, but man, that is impressive. And while gaming, we saw the clocks boost up to nearly 2 gigahertz, all while only hitting a max temperature of 70 degrees. So yeah, this is a pretty awesome little gaming system, even for 2022 prices. But I did want to run one more test on the GPU, and that was to test encoding. So I fired up Handbrake, took one of my old YouTube videos that was 4K H.264 and rendered it down to 1080p H.265 using NVENC encoding. And rendering it from 4K to 1080p, we were getting 84 FPS, which, again, really impressive for a 50 series card. That's more than double the speed of the 30 FPS video it was encoding. So yeah, I'm honestly happy with it. Final thoughts on the system as a whole. Do I recommend it? It depends. Do you want brand new hardware, and can you get access to it? If the answer is yes to those, this is an amazing machine for the price. If you don't care about getting used hardware and you only care about gaming, you don't really care about ray tracing or DLSS, then maybe look for an older 2nd gen Ryzen processor and try to pair that with maybe an older 10 series NVIDIA card. But for those people who want new, they want the warranty, they want to make sure that this will last a long time, I 100% recommend this build. For around $550 for the CPU and GPU, pair that with about $150 worth of RAM, $150 motherboard, then you need power supply and case, you're looking at probably $1,000. Now, yes, I know that is a lot of money. That is why budget is in quotes, but this is what a budget build with lower end budget parts gets you in the year 2022. I don't make the rules. I don't make the prices. I am just here to show you if you want new parts and you want to go with the budget line, this is what you get. So I hope you liked the video. I hope you learned something. I hope you found it entertaining. I'm very curious to know if this is something you would actually build. If not, let me know down below. Let me know what you're running. I definitely want to hear from you guys. But that is it. Feel free to drop a like. If you like content like this, please consider subscribing. Check out the links below if you want to support the channel or join the Discord and come hang out with a bunch of nerds. We're always in there talking about tech, so feel free to stop by. But that is it. If you've got this far, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.